Okay, good evening. Welcome to a special meeting for Blanc Township Board of Trustees for Wednesday, August 5th. Yeah, I'd like to call the meeting to order with, let's please stand for the pledge. Ms. Lane, can you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
the United States of
the United
America
States of America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it
which
stands,
stands
one nation,
one nation
under God,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
If I can ask for an approval of the agenda, if there's a motion. Ms. Lane? Here, you need to unmute yourself, Ms. Lane.
So move.
Okay, motion by Mr. Massey. And remember, if you're going to speak, Ms. Lane, go ahead. You need to unmute your line. You've got your thing muted, and I can't unmute it.
Whom are you speaking to?
Ms. Lane has her feed muted, and
okay.
I've sent a message. Okay, you should be unmuted now.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Massey made the motion.
I'll support it, Mr. Chair.
All right, go ahead and call for the vote.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Myself? Mr. Bennett?
Yes. Well, I thought you were asking for Mr. Mansour. I couldn't hear you.
I just saw Mr. Mansour join us.
Okay.
And Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
So what
Okay.
I understand at this point, Mr. Bennett, is absent are Trustee Adkins and Trustee Thomas.
That's what it looks like to me. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so we'll go to citizen comments, and I'm going to ask Melissa Roberts, we open the lines for everyone. Is that what we're going to do? Okay, actually, if we have some people with their hands up, on your screen, if you're joining us as a guest, there should be a button that you can click to raise your hand, and we will unmute you. So we'll start at the top of the list here, and we will go to the first resident for comment. Yep, you're unmuted, Ms. Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. My name is Maria Hobson. My address is 8389 Parkside Drive. I just wanted to let the board know that I have spoken to hundreds of residents over the past couple of months, and I'm always open to hear other opinions, but nobody felt any differently regarding the non-transparency of the trustees. The residents spoke loud and clear at the election yesterday. Unfortunately, I've seen a positive change in Trustee Thomas over the past couple of meetings, and I don't feel he should have been the incumbent Democrat trustee to be voted out. I strongly believe the other incumbent Democrat trustees should have been voted out, and I will continue to do everything I can to make that happen in the November election. But now it's time to mitigate the damage these trustees have done to this great community. Now it's the time to really see what these four trustees are made of. The people have spoken, and I hope you've listened. It's time to complete your term and establish your legacy. With the exception of Mr. Thomas, the trustees continue to double down and arrogantly pursue their own personal agendas. I hope you spend the next 3 months making amends and leave office respectfully. I hope you don't continue the downward spiral of the Blanc Township Board. It's time to stop the circus act and present yourselves as professionals. I'm referring to the other three trustees. You've done enough damage to the township when you unjustly terminated Mr. Limita, and that's going to cost the residents a hefty sum. I would suggest you drop your personal agenda with respect to the superintendent/manager position, and you drop your obvious personal grudge against Mr. Limita and even against Mr. Bennett. These gentlemen have always conducted themselves in a professional manner and have always had the best interests of the township in mind when making decisions. Please allow the next board to decide the future of Blanc Township, and please listen to Trustee Thomas. The supervisor and the police chief are more than capable of handling the extra duties of the superintendent as a short-term only fix. Stop searching for excuses and do the right thing. I'm sure the police chief can handle his own schedule and prioritize his time, and I'm equally sure the supervisor is capable of the same. Mr. Bennett has always had far more responsibilities than Mrs. Hoffman, and I think it's time that the board should recognize this. It's ridiculous to even propose that you have an interim manager, and I think that it's going to be detrimental, and I think that you should leave all of this up to the next board. It's a waste of time and a waste of township resources, and I'm sure that this is not how you would conduct the business if the money was coming solely out of your own pocket. Finally, I would like you to discuss the union contracts in an open session rather than the executive session that's on the agenda, especially the contracts which haven't even started negotiations yet. It's my understanding negotiations have been delayed with the COVID and the unmerited termination of the superintendent. Unless you're trying to be vindictive, I can't see a reason for you to review the contracts at all. This should be left to the new board, since the contracts will reflect time in the new administration. But if you strongly are compelled to discuss the union contracts, please do it in the open and own your own opinions. Don't hide behind closed doors and point fingers at other board members. Please take responsibility and own your actions. I'm curious to see your true character come out in the next 3 months. I'm speaking as a township resident, and I can tell you many feel the same. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. We'll go to the, let's see here. We'll go to Mr. Anderson. Go ahead. Unmuting. We need Mr. Anderson. Are you online? Mr. Anderson?
Your audio on my end.
Okay.
I see a bunch of muted mics in front of me.
Larry Anderson, no. Mr. Anderson, you're live now.
There we go. Okay, do you hear me okay?
Yes.
Very good. Larry Anderson, 6545 Kings Point Road. On June 23rd, a very abrupt motion, one that was not even on the agenda, was made regarding the contract of the township superintendent. After a very short discussion, that employment contract was terminated by this board. I can't understand why such an important operational decision was made in such haste. A decision such as that one requires much forethought and planning well in advance of the action. Before that decision was made, this board should have discussed and had in place a predetermined plan or process to follow up. Questions such as what will the next steps be, how or to whom will be delegated those duties, what processes or action will the board take to fill the position, and several others should have been addressed prior. It took this board 10 minutes to terminate him. And now here we are, 6 weeks later, and still you are arguing and bickering over what you should do next. This is such an unorganized mess. The ship has gone way off course, we're stuck on a sandbar, and the only thing this crew is doing is fighting over who should be in charge. I think the residents made it clear yesterday that they are not happy with some of the actions this board has taken over the past year or so. The residents are paying attention. In the next few months, will this team start working together as a proper professional board, or will you just turn up the heat and continue on their current path? In regard to the replacement of the superintendent position, Michigan has 1,240 townships, and Grand Blanc Charter Township is among the largest. Finding a candidate who is qualified and has the skills and experience necessary, the experience we need, requires a very thorough search and screening and interview process. This is not enough time. There is not enough time between now and November to properly complete that process. As a candidate, I feel it would be in the best interest of the township to let the next board complete that process to ensure it is not rushed and possibly compromised due to that shortened time frame. That is all I have to say tonight. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We'll go to our next attendee, Ms. Roberts. And actually, go ahead. Yep. Mr. Yancho, we're unmuting your line, or go ahead and unmute your, okay. We should be able to hear you now.
Thank you, Supervisor. It's pretty clear from the results of yesterday's election that the residents want some change. That's not unprecedented in our community. Similar thing happened in 2016. We only carried a few incumbents over. We elected a new supervisor, a new clerk that had previous experience. the incumbent treasurer, 4 new supervisors, one of which had previous experience. Similar situation exists now. 2021, we'll have an incumbent supervisor, a new treasurer, a new clerk, and at least 2 new trustees, if not 4 new trustees. So we have to make sure that the people in those, I'll call them lame duck positions, operate with the decorum and civility that has been expected of them, and that they will hold their heads up and stay honorable to the citizens and their community that they were elected 4 years ago to represent. I hope that those trustees and other officers will take the high road and continue to work for the residents and community of Grand Blanc. I further believe
Mr. Yancho, I think you have a bad connection. We can't hear you right now. Mr. Yancho, I think there's a bad connection, but we cannot hear what you're saying at this point. So we apologize for not being able to for you to finish your comment.
sorry.
Okay.
I live on a dirt road.
We lost you, Mike, Mr. Yancho. We lost you at I think when you said one of your last comments, furthermore or something. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next attendee, Ms. Roberts. Okay, Sarah Hugo, your microphone is unmuted at this time. Good evening.
Good evening. This is Sarah Hugo. My address is 5545 Thrush Drive. First of all, I just wanted to thank the community and those who supported me in the primary election. I'm excited for what the future holds for the township, and I really hope to be a part of it in the future. As far as your agenda item goes today, I believe the township does not need an interim township manager. And I would like to suggest that the next township board start the process in hiring the next township superintendent. Supervisor Bennett and Deputy Supervisor Wiles have been doing a great job, and they're more than capable of running the operations of the township until the new board is selected. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hugo. Any others that wish to speak? We'd ask that you click on the button to raise your hand. Not seeing any other hands raised. Okay, I see a hand raised here, Mr. Fike. Go ahead and unmute. Okay, Mr. Fike, you're unmuted.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Joel Fike. I just want to echo Sarah's comment and thank everybody for their support in me during yesterday's primary election. I look forward to running in November, and I look forward to a very clean race where we can keep issues at the forefront. And I would agree with Sarah regarding this talk about possibly having an interim superintendent. I think the way it is right now is sufficient. I don't think there's any reason to bring somebody on for 3 months and then, have someone new perhaps come in for 3 or 4 months later. I think the board should realize that some of these board members won't be there later, and that a new board should take this up. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fike. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? There should be a button on your screen to be able to click to raise your hand. Any other public comment? I don't see any. Do you, Ms. Roberts? Okay. We will close public comment and we will go to our operational issues. And the first item on the agenda is the topic of the board will have a discussion regarding interim manager. I would like to make a few comments. The election results from last night mean that most, if not all, of our board will change as of November following the general election. Individuals, or you may interpret the election results in many ways, but I believe this was a referendum from the residents and taxpayers wanting a change in how we conduct business as a board. We can continue the weekly sparring at these meetings for the next 3 months and leave a legacy of being a group whose accomplishments are overshadowed by strife. Or we can listen to the voters and change the way we conduct board business. I know this board is capable of working together for the good of our residents. We accomplished a great deal the first 3 years of our term. I think we can get back on course. Chief Wiles and I have the day-to-day operations of the township covered. Working with our exceptional department heads and staff, we have the bases covered. To hire an interim manager at this point would only be for a couple of reasons, and they are not good. A, to take away my authority and responsibility and to assign it to somebody off the street. Or B, for the board to have even more control over the day-to-day operations and staff. I believe this board should not be involved in the day-to-day operations at all. And I also believe the voters spoke to that issue loud and clear. We have been operating for over a month now with our current operations. To hire an interim manager would be similar to us at the staff level trying to change a tire while driving 50 miles an hour and then asking us to teach someone else to do it at the same time. I hope that the board is not trying to use this as an opportunity to rush and replace our former superintendent with the hopes of hiring this person on a permanent basis. The next board should have that right. I believe it would be the right thing to do for the board to compensate the chief and I for our extra time and work. If you choose not to provide a fair level of additional compensation, we are going to continue to be in charge of the day-to-day operations, and Chief Wiles will continue assisting me as deputy supervisor. Let me make this perfectly clear. Under the current lame duck status, 5 of the 7 board members will not be on the ballot in November. I absolutely oppose moving forward hiring either an interim manager or permanent superintendent. Like I said, I believe this board, prior to this past year, accomplished a number of things. If we want our legacy of accomplishment, let's decide to come together and make our last 3 months something we can be proud of. I'll open it to anybody else that has a comment at this time. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself if you have something to say, and then mute yourself afterwards. So if you want to raise your hand, or there's probably a button for you to raise your hand, but we can, if you want to raise your hand, we can call on you in order. Okay, I don't see any discussion. Okay. Ms. Lane, go ahead and unmute. Go ahead and unmute your line, Ms. Lane.
Right. As we had a prior meeting, Mr. Supervisor, I don't know of anybody that could fill in the interim and do what I think is the appropriate job for the township. I haven't heard of any comments from any other board members, so I don't know what their thoughts are, but that's mine. Okay,
thank you, Ms. Lane. Mr. Mansour, go ahead and unmute your line. Go ahead, Mr. Mansour, you're unmuted.
Okay, I'm there now. Okay, thank you, Supervisor Bennett. So, regarding the discussion around the interim manager, a couple of things. First, I think that one of your earlier points was that you would expect it to take quite a bit of time in order to be able to do a good search for a new replacement for a manager or superintendent. In fact, I think you said it took over a year last time. So, in recognition of that, and I'm not sure it's going to take a year, I mean, it's probably going to be much less. I mean, what we're doing here is we're looking at this situation going forward here for a number of months. You recommend having the new board participate or actually make the final selection of a new manager, superintendent. That's going to be, you know, November, December, maybe even later time frame. So the question that I raise here is, you know, for the next 4 or 5 months, are we in a position, you know, with all the things that are going on, to be able to continue on as we are, with you expanding the time that you devote to the township, and Chief Wiles also taking on some additional duties, which I'm not exactly sure, as our prior discussion about his contract really is allowable. So that's the question here that I'd like to raise for the discussion.
I two things in answer to that, Mr. Mansour, is that yes, I am prepared until we get to the new board to make a decision with regard to that, which will be in beginning of November or mid-November. As far as the chief's contract, I pulled that out, and I don't see where there's a conflict. It basically says that it's a commitment to the township, and all we're doing is adding some responsibilities. It's not a separate job, and I'd be dumbfounded to find in the contract anywhere. If you look at, and I know Mr. Laddie probably has a copy in front of him, but if you look at item number 10, chief to devote full time to township. The chief will devote full-time attention and energies to the business of the township, and during this employment will not engage in any other business activity, regardless of whether such activity is pursued for profit, gain, or other pecuniary advantage that is directly related to the township business while he is employed. So he's devoted to the township, and this is just some added responsibilities. But so we had Mr. Guzak.
Could we have Attorney Laddie speak to that? Because I don't have a copy of this contract. I know you do. You always have the contracts. We don't. But if he could just speak to that, that would be nice.
Mr. Laddie?
Yeah, I don't have a copy of his contract in front of me either. Okay. But what you could consider is, I mean, so if the township, if the board's so inclined, then the board can make a determination that they find that clause doesn't prohibit him from doing any additional work. We did have an additional contract or a separate contract pursuant to the recommendation of the MTA. But again, if the board's inclined to have Deputy Supervisor Wiles carry out his duties and doesn't find that to be a conflict, then you can make that determination.
Okay. All right, any other comments? Ms. Lane, you need to unmute your line.
If we do have 2 subcommittees, and I think that we're going to work together in order to develop job descriptions and maybe pros and cons of a superintendent versus a manager form of government, and to make a decision at a future meeting on wages or stipends for you and Mr. Wiles. Isn't that still going ahead?
Well, that was my intention. Mr. Mansour had emailed asking that we hold a board meeting to discuss it. My thought was, there's a planning commission meeting tomorrow evening that I think is fairly important that Mr. Mansour will be involved in, where they're going over the master plan. So I didn't want to conflict with that meeting. Mr. Laddie will be involved in that as well, I believe. But so it's kind of, and then with the election yesterday, I know you were tied up a little bit. So and Monday as well. So I'm not sure that this week was the most opportune week to try and meet. But I would be pleased to set up a meeting for that task force. I asked individuals to email me their schedule when they'd be available. I hadn't heard anything, but we can pick Monday if that works for individuals. We have a board meeting on Tuesday of next week and Thursday. So if you want to move forward with that, Ms. Lane, we can have the task force, one of those task forces meet on Monday. The other one meet on Wednesday.
That's fine.
Otherwise, we'll move forward with having the task force and meet that way. Okay, Mr. Massey, go ahead and unmute your line.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
what the board is attempting to do here is not brain surgery. Listen to many speak, they act like this leadership with the township is something that you have to be a brain surgeon to do. This is basic leadership stuff that we have done. And this board has made quite a few accomplishments that other boards were afraid to touch. So it sounds as though, listening to some of the comments, they act as though, and especially one board member that made a comment, previous board member that made a comment, when, I'll put it like this, when he or she was on the board, they had the same opportunity to make those changes. And they were reluctant to make those changes because they are afraid of political feedback that may be negatively coming back to them. The board was elected, any board, it doesn't mean that the current board that's in place. I believe when the residents elect someone to serve on the township, they're not electing puppets to be there just to do what I call a window dressing. They elect the board to make tough decisions. Anybody can make those little small decisions. We have never made a backroom deal. They have all the deals that the board have made have been open. Now, this executive session was not the board's idea. The executive session that we have always gone into was also agreed to by the chair of the board. We never had a discussion where we said, okay, one said we should be open and transparent. But the rule of the board, of the previous board, if there's something that should be discussed before it is brought to an open meeting, then it requires an executive session. And Mr. Chair, I think you will agree to that. This board has never gone into an executive session to hide anything. We have always been open and transparent. So for anyone to say that this board go into an executive session just because they're trying to hide something, I think that's falsely accusing the board of bad leadership. And you're here, Mr. Chair. You can attest to that. If you disagree that we have ever gone into an executive session just because we was trying to hide something, that was the rule that prior to this board being put in place. So now what is the big deal that we are trying to hide something, this current board? I don't see that. And I just see someone talking and don't have the ability to lead. So they don't understand leadership. Everything, the decision that this board has made has been in the best interest of the township. We have saved the township thousands of dollars. And those thousands of dollars have turned into millions of dollars. You can attest to that, Mr. Chair. You were there. You agreed to those decisions that we made. And anything that we have done have been in the board's authority. We have never overstepped our authority. So for anyone to say that this board has ever overstepped their authority, they're just throwing something out there that that they have no idea what they're saying. And I cannot go along with that, and I don't think, Mr. Chair, you will go along with that. We have always been transparent. We have always discussed things open. Now, one thing that I hear a lot of things about, I'm going to say this, is that we have asked the chair and the former superintendent to put things on the agenda that did not get to the agenda. So after a while, when you keep asking for something, you make the necessary steps that you have to do. You shaking your head, but you're lying on that part, because we have asked you, if you go back and listen to all our recordings, there are several things that we have asked you to do, Mr. Chair, and you would never put it on the agenda.
Okay.
So it appears, though, that we come to a meeting and add things to the agenda. The things that we added to the agenda was simply the things that we asked you to put on the agenda, and that's it.
Okay. Well, I can see that our residents' request for us to bring our board meetings to a new level is falling on deaf ears. At least that's what I'm hearing right now. But anyways, Mr. Mansour, go ahead and unmute your line.
Thank you. Thank you. So it looks like we're moving off of that first topic, and I just want to just kind of close that. Trustee Massey, I think, has moved on past it, but just in closing, okay, so I understand the direction here that we want to, looks like we want to continue to split the additional duties between you and Chief Wiles, but I would make just a point that I mean, I do expect that our chief is fully employed with his previous duties, and if we are looking to have him accept additional duties on a protracted basis, then I mean, I think that you know, does merit another look at
Okay.
you know, at how well he's you know, at how busy he's kept. So I just saying, over time, as an interim basis for a short period of time, certainly people step up. But if we're looking at a protracted time, I'm not sure that I would agree that adding those duties on a longer term basis to him would be a good idea. Okay. Thank you.
And I will schedule the task force meetings. I just want to make a comment that I did receive a phone call from a resident. They didn't give me their name, but they suggested that I not mute board members and let them continue. I know our last meeting lasted from, I think, might have got out here at 10:30, and I like the idea of people being able to be heard on our board, but I would just ask that, you know, maybe what we do is consolidate our comments so that maybe one or two comments on a topic, but coming back and forth, you know, multiple times, I would just ask that try and prepare so that the comments are more concise. And I will try to refrain from using the mute button maybe quite as much. I see Mr. Massey has his hand up. Go ahead, you have to unmute. Okay. Go ahead. Yes.
Trustee Mansour, I am all for an interim manager. I'm 100% for an interim manager. Now, if we need further discussion, I'm all for that. But I see nothing wrong with an interim manager, because we are sounding as though that this is brain surgery. That's what I was referring to. That there are many people out there that are qualified. When I was working, we always said if we lost the president of the company and there was no one else out there, so you're saying that we would lose the company. No. There are a lot more qualified people out there than the previous superintendent. So I am 100% for an interim manager, because the chief's contract calls for him to dedicate his time to
the township.
Yeah. So if we, just the way I see it, and that's what I'm for 100%.
All right. I will schedule task force meetings for next week, and we'll see who can make it. In terms of going into executive session to discuss these, if we can bring Mr. Aaron Wiles. We have with us this evening David Laddie, our municipal attorney, and we also have Aaron Graves, our labor attorney from Bodman Law. And we are going to be discussing a couple of union contracts, the first of which is our police command staff, which is our sergeants, lieutenants. They've ratified a contract, and our board is going to want to have a meeting to review it. And then also we're going to have a discussion in closed session with regard to Chapter V and W. I believe that our previous discussion with our labor attorney as well as our HR generalist suggested that these not be in open session, and I would just ask if Mr. Graves, from Aaron Graves, could comment on that and why we don't do that in open session. Mr. Graves? Okay, go ahead, and you can unmute your line. Okay,
thank you. You know, we don't want to give away strategy or the internal thoughts on what the board may be thinking about these labor contracts, because obviously you're negotiating with opposition. It's not the same as when you're in litigation, but it's similar, where you wouldn't want the other side to know what your thoughts are regarding the negotiations. So that's the general reason why contract negotiations, discussions about contract negotiations are held in closed session at townships.
okay. At this time, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss well, you've got the agenda items, so if somebody wants to make the proper motion to discuss those items, we can move on that. Just I ask that you unmute yourself if you would care to make the motion. Ms. Lane?
Okay, am I unmuted now?
Yes. Yep.
I would move that we go into executive session to discuss all of the labor contracts, police, command, sergeants, V and W AFSCME.
Is there support? Unmute yourself. Go ahead and unmute. Everybody unmute themselves, and because we're going to take a roll call vote in just a moment.
Yeah, I'll support that. I mean, that's the way we've done it for the last 12 years.
Okay. Mr. Guzak and Mr. Massey, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I can't unmute myself.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm unmuted now.
Yes.
I was just going to support it.
Okay. All right, so Ms. Lane, go ahead and do the roll call vote.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Here, Mr. Guzak, you need to unmute your mic.
I did.
Okay.
Now it's back to mute.
Nope, you're unmuted now.
Yes.
And Supervisor Bennett?
Yes.
And absent are Trustee Atkins and Thomas.
Okay.
I think Trustee
No,
Atkins is
Atkins is on the line, but I'm not sure he can respond or something. We've been
Well, you should be able to go and do this.
well, I've been asked.
Here, it says I can't unmute the button because the host has muted me. That's what it says on my screen.
Okay, you're not muted. We can hear you fine.
Okay, well, that's the message I got when I tried to unmute.
And we're clicking on the ask Mr. Atkins to unmute, but nothing seems to. I don't know. He can hear us now, I guess. Mr. Atkins, you vote yes, affirmative to go into closed session? We can't hear you. He's raising his thumb, so we'll take that as a yes. With that, bear with us for just a moment. I don't believe that we want to take action on this tonight. It'd be much easier to do this next week. We would thank our attendees for joining us. We are going to go into closed session now, and we're going to stop the live stream. And my thought is that unless this board objects, I would prefer not to take action in having to reconvene the public meeting tonight and just take care of it next week if we decide to move forward with any action. Is that the consensus? Anybody object? Okay, that's where we'll go then. And we're going to stop the live stream and the recording, and we'll be moving into a room, so bear with us, everyone.